Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India 171. I'm Geoffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon, Geoffrey.
So, viewers, the episode today is caution and warning. In our episode yesterday, we said that all is not what it seems. Some viewers have cautioned that we do not have the full picture yet. Some viewers have warned other viewers not to draw conclusions without evidence. In a modern commercial aircraft, you will receive messages in an increasing order of importance: advisory, caution, and warning. So viewers' comments: Creme Brulee 4759. Thank you. While the cause may seem obvious causes have many times been proven to be incorrect. Until every possible cause has been examined and ruled out, to assume that it was pilot is just wrong.
Point, creme brulee. And we are going through the process of elimination, having looked at all possibilities.
We are indeed. Max Nilda 4471. Why are you riding the dead horse? Everything for clicks. You both are not pilots. That's not very nice. Richard, you got a pilot's license, don't you?
Yeah, I have two, in fact, single engine aircraft and a glider pilot's license. But I guess Max Nilder is getting at the fact that I'm not a commercial pilot. I also am an aeronautical engineer and a specialist on avionic systems. What about you, Geoffrey?
Well, seeing you asked, my articles for Air Transport World on the pilot interface with technology have won 3 international awards at the Royal Aeronautical Society in London. And on top of that, those same articles are used by the University of Southern California. I've been invited there as a guest speaker to address Professor Najim Mishkati's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering classes, and my articles on TCAS, runway excursions, ramp safety, automation, and pilot training are used as handouts in his classes, both degree and continuing education, for the USC Aviation Safety and Security Program, which is human factors in aviation safety. So I know a little bit about it, although I'm not a pilot.
Yeah,
So,
well, Max, there you go, you see.
yeah, yeah, all is not what it seems.
All is not what it seems. Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, he's right to ask the question, and we're right to answer it, and give our credentials, because we don't normally list all our credentials. This is something we don't normally do. So, Stephen Ferris 5133. Everything I have been able to locate online in answer to the question, how long after the triggering event before RAT deployment commences and before critical hydraulic electrical power is available, states, therefore, after triggering error condition, the RAT on a 787 can complete deployment and begin producing power within a time frame of 6 to 10 seconds. And in answer to the question, can the RAT on a 787 deploy even if the plane is still on the runway and has not yet lifted off, I read, yes, the ram air turbine, RAT, on a Boeing 787 can deploy while the aircraft is still on the runway and before takeoff. These, in brackets, necessary triggering conditions can occur even before the aircraft lifts off, meaning the RAT could deploy while the plane is still on the runway. This creates a puzzling conundrum since, as I understand it, the report states the RAT was deployed by, I should say, 080847. This in turn implies the command to deploy, initiate of deployment, must have occurred between 6 and 10 seconds prior to that time, i.e. between 080837, even before the aircraft left the ground, and 080841, still before the fuel cutoff switches transition from run to cutoff position. Does this not imply there was something seriously wrong and clearly before the fuel cutoff switches transitioned? As much as pilot suicide murder may seem obvious to many respondents, how do we square the above with that conclusion? For the intentional suicide scenario to be true, it would appear that either the analysis just above is not correct, or the supplied time for the RAT deployment is in error and occurred later than 080847. Until this can be convincingly explained, I conclude that caution in moving to any firm conclusions is still warranted. So, Richard, over to you. Very, very good point.
Yeah, an excellent analysis laid out very clearly. And there are about 50 other comments from viewers who equally point out to varying degrees from their analysis that something just doesn't add up with the times reported in the preliminary report on one hand and the information we have from the Boeing documentation and manuals on the other hand. So let's step through it step by step, the whole process. The first thing is we know for sure that the RAT was deployed. We have
Yeah.
evidence from figure 15, the CCTV screenshot of RAT deployment on page 14 of the preliminary report. Although I have to add, one viewer commented, "Oh, well, that must be a fake picture then." Um, so well, I'm
Can't
taking
win.
it I'm taking it at face value that it's a genuine photograph, and it was widely reported from other sources and other photographic and video evidence that the RAT was deployed. So if we take that as read, the second point, the RAT serves as an emergency source of electrical and hydraulic power and is not constrained by any particular operating time or any limits on that time or by any airspeed having to be achieved or any altitude having to be achieved. And that evidence comes from the Boeing Flight Crew Operating Manual, paragraph 6.20.3. And it doesn't matter which revision of the FCOM you look at, they all agree on that statement. Number three, the RAT is stowed in a compartment aft the right main landing gear, and the evidence for that is a screenshot we're showing, and it's also clearly stated in the Boeing training manual. We're going to show you a screenshot of the RAM, or the RAT turbine operation, firstly with the door closed. And the next point, there are two independent power sources to the RAT deployment solenoids. One is the main battery bus, and the other is the APU battery bus. And we're told the RAT blades will not turn until after it is deployed more than 12 degrees. It has to come clear of the housing before it starts. We're also told there are two heaters in the generator. They keep the temperature inside the generator above freezing when the RAT is stowed. And in the air, only one heater is active at a time. The second heater is for redundancy. And the evidence for that is from the Boeing training manual.
Richard, we have a video of the RAT deploying in which we are showing a clip. Talk us through the clip.
Yeah, the RAT is deployed using a spring-loaded action, and the spring is quite strong, and the action takes just less than 0.8 seconds. In the video, you can see if you take that video and analyze it in depth, the deployment starts at frame 18, the deployment ends at frame 40. The total frames for deployment are then 40 minus 18 is 22 frames. So it's 23 frames in total. The frame rate is 30 frames per second. So 23 frames would be 0.767 seconds. And the evidence comes from the Boeing training manual and from the video. And the next point I would raise is the RAT deployment can happen at any time. The evidence for that is from the Boeing FCOM again. And the RAT can be deployed manually or automatically.
So now we are showing a screenshot of the overhead panel and the switch for the manual deployment. Walk us through the manual and automatic deployment of the RAT.
Yeah, so the manual deployment is simply the push of a button in the cockpit overhead panel. And that comes from the Boeing FCOM, again, the section 6.20.3. Automatic deployment is a bit more complicated. There's a list of different possible triggers. The FCOM states, number one, dual engine flameout. Number two, total hydraulic failure. Number three is captain and first officer flying instrument bus fails, so they don't have any electricity from the instrument bus to power their displays in the cockpit. The next one is loss of all four EMPs, electric motor pumps, and faults in the flight control system on approach. Well, okay, that's not relevant. In this case, the aircraft was not on approach. And the next one, loss of all four EMPs and engine fails on takeoff or landing. And that is a relevant possibility. And the RAT was deployed already over the runway at around 75 feet above ground level. When you look at the screenshot evidence from the CCTV screenshot included in the preliminary report on page 14.
Richard, the preliminary report does not state when the RAT deployment was initiated.
Exactly. And now we're coming to the heart of the matter. So the preliminary report only states the point in time where the hydraulic pump began supplying hydraulics. So let me walk you through the process. You trigger the RAT deployment, and the time of initiation should have been in the report, but we can still work it out. And we need to look at both manual and automatic deployment, and that is also not in the preliminary report. But we do know how long it takes between initiation and full deployment. And that's been correctly pointed out by our viewer comments, between 6 and 10 seconds. Now, you need to understand why they say between 6 and 10. The hydraulic pump begins supplying hydraulic power after 6 seconds, but the electrical power only stabilizes after 10. So the full hydraulic and electric takes 10 seconds, but the hydraulic is already online after 6. So when the preliminary report states, and I quote, as per the EAFR data, both engines' N2 values passed below minimum idle speed, and the RAT hydraulic pump began supplying hydraulic power at about 08:08:47. You can then subtract 6 seconds to come down to 08:08:41 for an initiation. You may need to add another second for the triggering of the rat deployment, and you need to add 4 more seconds after that time to when the electrical power would be stabilized. So 080851. And, it gets a bit complicated, but it could easily
Mm.
have been laid out in the preliminary report. So, just to sum up, the deployment was initiated at 080841, 6 seconds earlier than the hydraulic power coming on. And that means it was 2 seconds after the transition from ground to air mode. And it was at a point around about 75 feet off the ground.
So we're showing now a screenshot of the rat fully deployed. Can you comment about that?
Sure. So we're saying rat deployment was initiated at 080841, 2 seconds before both engines' fuel switches run to cutoff, which is timed at 080843 in the preliminary report. And the fuel switches moving from run to cutoff at 080843 was done by the crew, and it was possibly in response to warnings received on the ICAS display, or it was possibly in response to memory checklist items. And I would also add in the mix that the landing gear retraction stalled. It appears the lever was moved to gear up, and we have evidence that the wheel bogies moved from the horizontal to a tilted position prior to being stowed in the landing gear storage in the aircraft fuselage. And that is further evidence of a possible aircraft hydraulics failure.
Mm. So I know you don't like to give conclusions, but I'm going to ask you again, what is the conclusion from all this analysis?
Well, it's managed, I think, in the preliminary report to be incomplete and unclear, and a lot of people are confused, having read and studied the preliminary report. And my conclusion is the preliminary report is a work of obfuscation. In other words, deliberately misleading and incomplete. And you have to then ask the question, why did they deliberately leave details out and confuse and mislead? And I think, to put it mildly, caution and warning alarms are sounding all over the place.
They certainly are, and we are going on the numbers they give us in the report. And as we've said earlier in an earlier episode, to the nearest second is just not good enough. But even to their nearest second, they seem to be out by a couple of seconds. And when they use words like about does not appear in proper crash reports. It's precise.
Yeah, and they have the data, so they can
Yep.
be precise. And why aren't they being precise?
Yeah. Yeah.
It beggars belief, frankly.
It really does. It really does. And so the question, the questions from the viewers, and I think there's about 50 or so of them around this sort of issue, and particularly the one from Stephen Ferris that sort of summed it all up. Very, very valid questions. And obviously, there's a lot of people out there looking at the numbers and saying there's something wrong here.
Yeah, and there is
Yeah.
something wrong here.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, Richard, thank you very much indeed for that analysis of the rat. Something is not right at all. We will be back tomorrow to answer more questions.
Yep, and I'm
Yep.
sure there'll be a raft. There was a raft around yesterday's episode, and
Yes, I
there'll be
know.
another raft today.
Yes, and on that subject, viewers, thank you so much for your interest, so much for your questions. Clearly, we can't answer them all. We're struggling. We're trying to answer some online. We're trying to summarize your questions with one or two from one or two viewers, but we really do appreciate them. We read virtually all of them. I can assure you of that, both Richard and I, and we discuss them at length. But actually manually typing out replies to 1,000 questions a day is an impossibility. But please keep them coming, and please keep those wonderful comments of support coming. We do appreciate those very much indeed. So, Richard, once again, thank you for all the work you've done on this one.
You're welcome.
And viewers, please subscribe to us, please like us, and please do tune in tomorrow for another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search, not the search, the the tragic crash of Air India 171. Thank you.